Hello and welcome to today's TOC podcast. I'm Joe Weichert, co-chair of O'Reilly's Tools of Change conference. As you've probably noticed by now, the TOCM has been very busy with webcasts and podcasts. Be sure to visit toccon.com for the latest TOC events. And here's another friendly reminder that we're just a few short weeks away from TOC Frankfurt. This year features not only the full-day TOC event on Tuesday, October 11th, but also a half-day social media workshop on Thursday the 13th. For more information or to register, visit toccfrankfurt.com. So for today's podcast, I'm joined by Jesse Wiley. Jesse works on digital and new business initiatives under the Josie Bass and Pfeiffer imprints of Wiley's Professional and Trade Division. He's also a member of the 7th generation of Wileys working for the company. Jesse, welcome to this TOC podcast.
Thanks, Joe.
So, Jesse, brands obviously play a big role in Wiley's trade book success, and Wiley's enjoyed phenomenal print results over the years with well-known lines like For Dummies and Frommer's and Betty Crocker, just to name a few. What are some of the lessons the organization has learned as you look to replicate that success in the ebook world?
Sure. We've learned a lot, I think, and we'll continue to. And in addition to the consumer brands we also have a lot of long-running professional and academic brands, which obviously are different, but also run into different considerations. And even in the trade book world, outside of the branded stuff, we kind of think of our authors and partners as brands unto themselves. So we're always kind of thinking about that in the digital world. But I think we're definitely learning that some things that you do in the print world don't transfer over to the online or ebook world, and some of the things that you do now are totally different than what we've done in the past. One of the obvious things is, as bookstores become less and less of a channel, you don't have an opportunity to kind of have your brand physically represented in a store the way it has been in the past. So, when customers would go into a brick and mortar store, they look around, see on the shelf, if you have a very distinct, recognizable brand, obviously they'd see that, find your book, and if they'd read the books before and had a good experience, they might right away recognize that brand. I think in the online world, you can do that to a certain extent, but it's definitely not the same. The other aspect is internal design and graphic challenges with ebooks. I think we're going through this transition stage where a lot of ebook designs or design in general from the print world is basically being crammed into the ebook format, and I'm sure you've seen and other people have noticed a lot of complaints on that end. And I think that's definitely a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because with the new kind of functionality that ebooks bring and ebook readers bring, we have an opportunity to kind of do all these things that we never could before in terms of adding links and kind of video and enhancements and all that kind of stuff. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity. I think one of the other things is kind of not just the internal, the ebook itself, but the kind of online shopping, which is obviously affects print too and not just ebooks. But the customer behavior changes driven by the way people find and discover books are having an impact too. And then of course there's a kind of, if you think about the brand less literally and more about the experience in general, I think the online world has created this place where where consumers have a lot more power and input. I mean, they can knock your brand, they can promote your brand. So figuring out ways to kind of both address concerns when customers have concerns, and also encourage them to promote your brand when they appreciate it through things like social media and stuff like that are a big opportunity.
Yeah, I got to say it's refreshing to hear somebody from a big publishing house like Wiley talk about how it's not just the in-house brands that matter, but the authors themselves are oftentimes the brand there. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the things I've noticed that we've struggled with too, and I think other publishers have, is getting back to your point of discoverability and replicating sort of the brand in the online format. Even something as simple as the cover, like a 6x9 cover, and now having to figure out what are the most important elements there to put into a thumbnail-sized icon in an app store, for example, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can see that has changed a huge deal in that you have to be able to represent something in a thumbnail, which obviously when the customer gets the book, they can see it in full size, but yeah, I mean, being able to notice it at that small of a size, I mean, you can see the print, the font sizes and the text on cover is changing, and obviously the emphasis is more now just on that front cover versus the whole jacket.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the more noteworthy e-content projects that Wiley's launched over the last year or so, with either existing brands or new products?
Yeah, we've had a lot. I mean, like a lot of publishers, I mean, there's been a huge increase lately. I can speak most about the Josie Bass and Pfeiffer imprints because I work most closely with those. But I think some of the stuff we're doing there is representative across the country. I mean, across the country too, across the world, but also across the different publishing we do. This last fall, we launched a product under our Pfeiffer imprint, which is for like training and leadership development, called Pfeiffer Custom. So custom publishing has kind of been a theme across a bunch of different businesses, but it's basically a platform that allows customers to customize their training using our content and adding their own and kind of designing their own kind of curriculum, so to speak. We also have something similar in our higher education business, and we're now kind of working across our businesses, whereas with Josie Bass, now we're putting content onto this custom publishing platform and creating special collections, which the outputs get delivered in both ebook and print, so it's kind of a hybrid world. We've also launched a series of community-focused websites. So community as in kind of focusing on the different markets, professional markets that we serve especially. So we've got one that just launched last couple weeks ago, actually, called nonprofitcommunity.com, and there's a lot of free content on there derived from our books or adapted from books, but also other content taken from other sites on the web. It's also leveraging our author networks and kind of creating that place that's more like a destination and less like a catalog site, which you guys at O'Reilly are obviously familiar with and have been doing for years. I think we've also got tons of apps. I mean, as a company, we've got many hundreds. I can't even keep track anymore of apps out. But I just got through working on a handful of kind of marketing-focused apps that have free content adapted from our books. They've got lots of different social media tools created to help share content. They've got, different website feeds. So like these new websites we're creating, we're feeding content with RSS into the apps. We're also developing some assessment apps, mostly around leadership, which is a category for us. So apps that actually assess leaders, and based on their scores, will give them kind of advice on how to improve. Some of the other things we're doing include virtual events, kind of not similar to this, but more kind of scripted online events where we've with their products, so not just marketing, but it's more like a professional development experience, online learning experience, where we're bringing customers directly to our authors and helping them engage, and they can ask questions, so there's presentation and answers. We've got a new business that we're building. It's already existing, where we do professional development for faculty at universities. So we're kind of developing a robust offering that has kind of both some live stuff and some recorded stuff that will help academics do their jobs better. We've also got kind of, speaking of brands, we've got kind of franchises that we call them around big best-selling books that have developed into kind of multiple product types. So we've got something called the Leadership Challenge, which was a book that was first published 25 years ago, but we have a whole franchise of products around that. So we've got kind of a very robust online assessment. It's a web application, not web software, not an app, where it's a leadership assessment too that's very kind of built out with all different kinds of tools and different observers that can test you, and you get your scores aggregated, and we've got all this data that we're collecting. We've also got an e-learning program, kind of like an online course connected to that as well.
Wow, that's quite a bit going on, and that's just kind of a snapshot within Josie Bass itself. I mean, the rest of Wiley's got, I'm sure, just as much in each of the pockets there as well, huh?
Yeah, it varies, by market and customer type. Obviously, the markets that are more kind of adopting technology, we've got more going on, but it's that's representative. I mean, e-learning, apps, all the different kind of ebooks formats. We're doing enhanced ebooks, which don't seem to be taking off in a huge way yet, but obviously even this Christmas is going to be a big turning point for tablets and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no question. So, I mean, it's interesting. Wiley is a 200-plus-year-old organization right now. Clearly, You just went through the litany of projects that are going on within Josie Bass. How hard is it to get an organization that's so sort of tied to that print model, and I wouldn't say set in its ways, but just has built such a solid model in the publishing industry to adapt and move forward in new forms of content?
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's obviously also an opportunity. I think trying to stay flexible when you start to get bigger is always a challenge. So it's kind of an ongoing thing. But I think in the middle of transition, it's harder. But we're doing the things that I think will situate us to kind of be around for a bit longer, at least. Um, we're continually kind of reorganizing our people and our businesses to adjust to the markets, which I think is essential. I can't, things are changing so fast. You can't just expect what worked even a year ago to work tomorrow. I think aligning kind of motivation for growth and especially digital is good, and we're doing that by kind of adapting our incentive plans for editors and stuff like that. Obviously, investing in the technology itself, but also the kind of supporting capabilities that make technology work, like project management, are important. We're also like developing better feedback loops with customers, getting closer to customers in general. And I think even for a bigger company, that's just as important or even more. So being able to gather feedback and then react and develop and adapt your projects as needed in a quick way. And so we're working a lot more on that. Those websites I mentioned will be a great tool for that. So being able to actually, gauge people on what their feelings are about the products and make adjustments.
So, how hard is it? I'm thinking about Clay Christensen's book, The Innovator's Dilemma, there, and I just would wonder in an organization, even within O'Reilly, it's kind of tricky to almost abandon your existing revenue stream and realizing this new one you're building out might cannibalize it. And so, how do you deal with that within Wiley? Is that something that you guys think a lot about?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot about it. It's also a challenge, and I just say I'm a big fan of Clay's as well. We actually just published his latest book, so I think his ideas are definitely pertinent to publishing. But like I said, I think this is also a challenge for our industry. It's not just company by company, like you said. You guys are facing it too. But I think the reality is that where there's still a decent print business, we still need to do both. And in a way, the print success is funding the new business. So it's kind of a balance, and a lot of it I think has to do with balance and timing. So when do you make that shift exactly? When do you kind of give up on this type of product and invest in that kind of product? So it's kind of an ongoing balance, and I think kind of watching the cues in the market and customer behavior, and obviously we're all watching this huge growth in ebooks, and at what point is that replacing print sales? And there's certain places where it looks like it's on top, and it's kind of timing that and really paying close attention. So we're doing a lot of kind of monitoring, I guess you would say. Another thing is kind of learning to fail too, which is not always an established kind of concept in publishing, but in the technology world, as innovation is built on kind of doing pilots, testing, learning to fail, expecting to fail, and kind of learning from both the successes and the failures. I mentioned incentives, kind of changing incentives, which you change people's behavior and you get a lot change pretty quick. And developing kind of capabilities, innovation is obviously there's a kind of idea creation part of innovation, but there's also the implementation. And in a way, there's no shortage of good ideas. I think sometimes the challenge is implementing on those good ideas. So we're definitely focused on developing those capabilities to implement those good ideas, because that's where you really find out if they can work or not.
Yeah, I love your point about learning from your failures there, and I mean it's hard to not get a little defensive about when a product or a new idea kind of falls apart, but identifying what caused that failure is just so critical. And one of the phrases we like to toss around within O'Reilly is fail forward fast. So,
Right.
you're trying to do a lot of experimentation, learn from the failures, and then reinvest in the things that work all along the way there.
Right. And like I said, like literally, expect and plan to fail. Like, we'll do these 5 pilots, and we know 3 of them won't work and 2 of them will, and it's almost kind of getting that philosophy down before you even start.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you touched a minute ago on direct relationships with readers. How important do you feel a direct sales channel is going to be for the publisher of the future?
think it's going to be very important as we, like I said, getting closer to customers is essential for any business, and especially I think for the publishing business now. I mean, technology has enabled everyone to potentially sell in a way, and it's a challenge as well with bigger companies, especially because we're still attached to our kind of partners and our distributors. So it starts to be a balance, but I think there's ways to kind of do both. So you can go direct, but you can't completely go direct. So we're kind of in that transition phase. But I think it's essential to start developing ways to kind of get closer to your customers and get that feedback loop going and kind of develop those relationships, because that's what's going to keep us going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, if anything, there have been some things we've done at O'Reilly that I feel like we've put in place not only for our own benefit, but in the hopes of spurring innovation with the retailers out there, so they'll start supporting the
Right.
same kinds of things, right?
And that's the thing is I think it's getting that idea with the whole kind of ecosystem that no one person necessarily owns the customer. So it's, how do we share in that? How do we kind of innovate together?
Yep, totally agree. How about self-publishing? Where do you see that fitting in the industry going forward?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. I mean, a lot of people worry about it, but so far it hasn't worried me a lot. In fact, I think there definitely are some possibilities with self-publishing and challenges that it brings, but I think it's actually given us as publishers a way to kind of reestablish our value proposition in a way. And I've also seen us and other publishers kind of benefiting it. I mean, I know we've picked up a bunch of books that have been, and authors that have been self-published, and they kind of go to market, and it kind of, once they get proven a little bit, we take them in, and then we kind of build them up to a whole other level. So that's actually benefited us. I think we're looking into, and I've seen other people look at actually selling self-publishing services. I think you can actually do that in custom too. So it's actually getting into that business to a certain extent ourselves. But obviously, in terms of kind of proving our value, I think let's be honest, there's a lot of not so great self-published stuff out there too. I mean, there's definitely a good portion, or I don't know, a decent portion that is good, but with that, there's a bunch of bad stuff. So it actually gives us the opportunity to show the value that we add in terms of curation, our kind of editorial knowledge, the things that we've done for years, for us, for hundreds of years, but some people I think kind of don't understand it. And when you start to compare it to some of the bad self-published stuff out there, people say, wow, there really is a value here. Even when it comes to like simple things like copy editing, I've seen big differences.
Yeah, no question about that. You know, who really I think has a fascinating model is Thomas Nelson Publishers in Nashville. Mike Hyatt started up this Westbow Press, I think it is, which is a self-publishing imprint within Thomas Nelson. And I've talked to him a number of times about it. They're very happy with the success, and like you said, they've been able to take some of the products out of there, I think, and look at even broader distribution going forward. So I can't help but wonder if there's an opportunity for even maybe a self-publishing shop within a traditional publishing house at some point.
I can see that. I mean, like I said, in terms of the custom publishing stuff we've done, a lot of it allows customers to add their own content. But I could see us working with other people where they could add other kind of self-published content. In a way, I mean, it gets tricky because you want to make sure your brand is strong, so you don't want to just accept anything. But there's ways to kind of mash up content in different ways. I mean, that's the thing. If the customers are interested, I mean, there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think Thomas Nelson did it right by creating a separate imprint so it doesn't dilute the impact of Thomas
Right.
Nelson itself. So, all right, so got to ask you this one, going to put you on the spot. Kindle guy or an iPad guy? Which is it?
Definitely an iPad, and it's not that I think Kindle's not a good product, but I'm not really a fiction reader, and I haven't been a cover to cover type reader in a long time. So I kind of got into the e-reading books with the first iPad. I'd already been reading a lot online, obviously, but I love the first iPad and like the second one too. My wife has a Nook Color, which I think is a great value for what it does, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Amazon comes out with in the fall
Yeah,
with their tablet.
yeah, me too. That's going to be my jump to the Android platform, as a matter of fact. So I'm looking forward to that. I had you picked for more like me, where you're both Kindle and iPad. So surprising to hear you're iPad only.
Yeah, well, I use the Kindle apps on the Apple devices, so in a sense, I use them that way, but not the actual hardware.
Yeah, no question. Okay, so last thing I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you're out there all the time looking at new products and platforms and so forth all around our industry. Anything that's caught your eye over the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, a lot of things catch my eye. And the reality is, I actually tend to look a little bit more outside the industry than in, because I just think a lot of the great innovation is going on there. And it not only is great innovation, but it's really thinking about publishing completely different. So not just what our traditional competitors are doing, but more what our competitors of the future are doing. So I try to look at that. I think one of the things that impressed me not that long ago was the Al Gore Our Choice app that was done by Pushpop Press, which it really just touched on the capabilities of functionality that an app can bring. But I thought it was a very well designed and executed product, and I thought Pushpop Press was great. I was kind of sad when they got bought by Facebook because it doesn't seem like they're going to continue doing that kind of more in the more, not, with publishers like us. I think it's probably going to be more something they develop for Facebook users, but we'll see. There's, things like Wolfram Alpha have been very impressive to me, and even further down that spectrum in terms of like artificial intelligence is, IBM's Watson, which is amazing. So these you wouldn't normally think of these as kind of more even traditional digital publishing, but I think they're pretty interesting. We have not to brag about our own stuff, but we have a really cool app that I use all the time called How to Cook Everything, which is a brand to us almost in a way, but it's a very functional cooking app that has all kinds of tools that go along, and I like to cook, so I use that a lot. In terms of platforms, obviously I mentioned iPad, so the iOS software and the app stores and all that kind of stuff I think are great platforms. And in terms of ebooks, as a kind of, if you think about it as a platform, I'm definitely looking forward to what EPUB 3 might be able to bring in terms of functionality. I think the things that you can do in apps are great, and I'd like to see that more in ebooks. And I'll actually, in terms of platforms, I like the Safari Online platform that you guys are part of. I think that's a great kind of model, and it's a very kind of user-friendly subscription service. And one of the things that I've noticed recently that really is a very cool platform that I think has a lot of potential for publishers is some of the Salesforce.com products. I was at the Dreamforce conference a couple weeks ago, and I've been using different products and services of theirs like Chatter and all the different CRM tools. And I think this idea about getting closer to our customers is really important, and the kind of tools and services and the platform that they provide is just an awesome way to really get close to your customers and obviously sell to them, but be able to kind of have feedback loops as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's so important to look outside our own industry for inspiration and see where things are heading. Going back to the first couple of points that you made about Wolfram and also with Push Pop Press with that Al Gore product,
Hmm.
I love those as well, and I have them on my iPad. The one thing I wonder about though is you look at those and you realize that writing a book by itself requires such a big developmental effort. Then you think about putting it in that format that those products came out in. It's like a whole new layer of development that has to be
Yeah.
applied to it, right? And then I start to wonder, okay, what's the scale here, and is it scalable? Because I think that we in the publishing industry have sort of gotten used to one level of development, by the
Yeah.
authoring, but then you've got to sort of lay this second one on top of it, and that's because I've talked to a number of folks. Open Air Publishing is another one that I spoke with recently. Same thing, just saying how scalable is this, and I think that's really what's going to make or break some of these platforms. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. Scalability is definitely a big issue for us. In terms of obviously our margins aren't huge. We have to be able to do stuff and do it at scale to be able to make it viable. So I think that's a big challenge. But I think I've seen and worked with a few different like app developers are basically creating publishing platform systems, on the client side that allow you to publish to a scale. And I think, some of the challenges have to do with content management and how you create content upstream. And I know we're thinking about digital first and things like that. We're actually creating the content almost in a different way up front and then publishing to all these different formats. And obviously that wouldn't make sense for every type of content, but I think the reality is that we have to do both and do many in different areas. So we're not going to be able to just do one format. We have to figure out how to do multiple formats.
And it gets back to your point about experimentation and learning from our mistakes. So totally agree with you. Well, hey, Jesse Wiley, thank you very much for being part of this TOC podcast. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Joe, and I love the TOC community. I go to the conferences and listen to the webcasts and all that. So it's a great thing to have. And I think obviously we're all competitors in different ways, but I think we're all in this industry that's in transition together, and it's exciting time. And I think there's many ways for us to all kind of work together to move the industry forward.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Jesse. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.